There's a pain you carry that doesn't have a name. It surfaces in your relationships, in your silence, in your dreams, and in the way you reach for love as if it's something you must earn. It disguises itself as self-sabotage, anxiety, guilt, or numbness. You think you've outgrown your past, but it whispers to you in your quietest moments, reminding you that something essential, something sacred, was fractured before you ever had words. And no matter how much you achieve, how far you run, or how deeply you love, there's an invisible thread that keeps pulling you back to the beginning. That thread is your mother. Not just the woman who gave you life, but the blueprint of your emotional world, your first experience of love, and the silent architect of how you see yourself. You'll never truly heal until you understand her. Not her actions, not her words, but the wound behind her choices, the wound that you inherited, the wound that shaped the person you've become. This isn't about blame, it's about awakening. She was your first home. Before you ever opened your eyes to the world, you were bathed in the rhythm of her heartbeat. You absorbed her stress, her joy, her fear, her dreams. You were a sponge for emotions before you ever knew what emotions were. She didn't just feed your body, she fed your psyche, and whether you were raised in tenderness or trauma, in closeness or chaos, her presence or her absence etched a permanent signature into your nervous system. That's where healing begins, not in forgiveness alone, not in detachment, not in pretending she had no impact, but in seeing her clearly, seeing the child inside her, seeing the weight she carried. Seeing the stories she never told, the love she didn't know how to give, and the pain she silently passed down to you without ever intending to, this speech is not about turning her into a villain, nor turning your pain into shame. It's about opening the door to the room you've locked for too long, the room where your unmet needs still cry, where your younger self still waits for a nurturing word, a soft touch, a moment of being fully seen. It's about bringing light to that room, because what we do not make conscious, we unconsciously repeat in our romantic relationships, in how we parent ourselves, in how we show up in the world. To truly reclaim your soul, you must walk through the shadow of the mother. Not the fantasy version, not the role society gave her, but the real, living woman, the woman who gave birth to you and all the unfinished stories buried within her. You must see her humanity to reclaim your own. Let us begin. Before you spoke your first word, before you opened your eyes to the light of this world, before you had a name, you were someone's heartbeat. Inside the womb, you didn't just grow organs and bones. You absorbed her unspoken emotions, her fears, her stress, and her unresolved grief. You were not just nourished by food, you were nourished by her nervous system. If she lived in fear, you were conceived in fear. If she doubted her worth, you began your life with those vibrations echoing in your cells. That's not poetry, it's biology. The womb is not just a space for growth, it is the first psychic mirror. You did not begin life as a blank slate, you were born into a system, an inheritance of emotional history. And your mother was the first architect of that system. Her touch, her tone, her gaze, her absence, all of it carved pathways into your mind long before your conscious memory could hold on to anything. These early experiences became your invisible guidebook for how love works, how safety feels, and whether or not you are worthy. If your mother looked at you with joy and acceptance, you grew with the unconscious belief that you are lovable. But if her eyes held pain she couldn't hide, if her presence was inconsistent or her love was conditional, you may have internalized the lie that you must earn love, prove yourself, or shrink to be accepted. That early relationship became the template through which you now measure all others. It shaped your tolerance for mistreatment, it molded your expectations, it framed your identity. Here's the truth most people avoid. Your mother wasn't just a woman raising a child. She was a woman carrying decades of her own emotional injuries, much of it unhealed, much of it unspoken. Her mother had shaped her. Her mother's mother before that. You inherited not only her love, but also her wounds, her longing, her rage, her silence, her shadows, and so much of your suffering now comes not from your own failures, but from not realizing you are still reliving her unfinished story. Think about the patterns that haunt you, the people you attract, the cycles you can't break, the voices in your head that whisper you're not enough, that you're too much, that if you just fix yourself maybe you'll finally be loved right. Those voices often sound like your own, but they started as hers, maybe not through words, but through the energy you were steeped in, through the gaze that didn't see you clearly, through the comfort that wasn't there when you cried. To understand your pain, you must look at her not just as your mother, but as a woman, a girl who was once a daughter, a soul who tried and maybe failed to give you what she didn't receive. This doesn't excuse the harm, but it explains the source. And when we understand the source, we no longer confuse the symptom for the truth. The infant inside you is still waiting, waiting to be held without conditions, waiting to be validated without having to perform, waiting to be seen without judgment. If your mother couldn't offer you that, it is not because you were unworthy. It is because she did not have it to give, and you cannot pour from an empty soul. Many of us carry guilt for seeing this truth. We protect our mothers with silence, out of loyalty, out of fear of seeming ungrateful. But truth is not betrayal. Truth is liberation. You cannot heal a wound you pretend isn't there, and you cannot grow until you separate her pain from your identity. Some of you were raised by mothers who were emotionally absent, physically there, but distant. Some by mothers who were critical, controlling, or enmeshed. Others by mothers who were too wounded to see your needs at all. You might have told yourself stories to survive. She did her best, she didn't mean to. It wasn't that bad, and maybe those are true, but you must also tell the other truth. It hurt, it confused you. It left a hole in your soul, and pretending it didn't only deepens that wound. The child inside you doesn't need another rationalization. It needs your honesty. It needs you to say, yes, I was affected. Yes, I missed something essential. Yes, I needed more. Not to condemn her, but to finally witness yourself, because until that child is seen, it will run your life, it will sabotage your joy, chase unavailable love, seek validation from those who mirror her. The mother wound is the wound beneath all others, and to ignore it is to keep running in circles, searching for healing in places that can't reach the root. When you understand your mother's pain, you begin to see your own with compassion. You stop blaming yourself for what you lacked. You stop trying to fix yourself to become lovable. You stop searching for her in other people, and most importantly, you begin to mother yourself, to give yourself the love she couldn't, to speak to your soul the way you wish she had, to hold your inner child in ways she didn't know how to. You stop becoming her shadow and start becoming your own light. But that light can only come when you face the mirror of the womb, not with resentment, not with rage, but with reverence. Reverence for the sacred responsibility you now carry, to end the pattern, to feel what she couldn't, to speak what she silenced, to love yourself in a way that heals the generations before you. This is the beginning. The mother wound is not your fault, but healing it is your responsibility, because what you don't heal, you pass on, and what you do heal, you free. Silence is not just the absence of words, it is a language of its own, a haunting, invisible inheritance passed down through generations of women who were not allowed, not taught, or not safe enough to speak their truths. And for many of us, it is the most dominant trait we inherit from our mothers, not the color of her eyes, nor the sound of her laugh, but her emotional muteness. This silence is not benign, it is not peace. It is suppression. It is the aching void that fills the spaces where love should have spoken and comfort should have reached. Silence is what your mother may have offered when you cried and she didn't know how to comfort you. It's what she defaulted to when you asked hard questions and she deflected or grew cold. It's what shaped your earliest understanding of emotional connection, that certain things are too dangerous to name. As children, we internalize silence as our fault. If she didn't explain, we believed we weren't worth explaining to. If she didn't hold us in our fear, we believed our fear was shameful. If she didn't say, "I love you," often or at all, we believed we were unlovable. But the truth is not that we were too much or too sensitive or too needy. The truth is that she had no emotional language to give. Many women raised in emotionally stifled households become emotionally unavailable mothers, not because they are cruel, but because they were never shown how to be emotionally honest. They were taught to survive, not to feel. Their own mothers rewarded silence, endurance, compliance. Vulnerability was weakness, tears were indulgence, needs were liabilities, and so when these women become mothers, they unknowingly pass on that same script. Be strong, don't cry, get over it. You may not even realize the silence until you become an adult and begin to experience relationships where deep emotional intimacy is expected. Suddenly, you're asked to express how you feel, to name your needs, to be honest about your wounds, and you freeze. You shut down, you feel shame, fear, or confusion. Why? Because no one ever taught you how to speak the language of the heart. Your mother couldn't give you what she didn't possess, and you inherited her silence like a ghost in your mouth. This is not about blame, it's about breaking a trance that keeps you stuck in surface-level connections, a trance that makes you mistake quiet for peace, a trance that makes you believe your emotions are dangerous when they are actually the key to your healing. You must wake up from the silence you were raised in. The tragedy is that many mothers believe they are protecting their children by hiding their pain. They think, if I don't talk about the trauma, it won't affect them. But silence does not erase suffering, it transmits it, and in the absence of words, the child fills the void with assumptions. I must have done something wrong. I must be the reason she's sad. I must not be lovable. You carry that silence like an invisible bruise. You feel it in your relationships where you struggle to ask for what you need. You feel it in your body where unspoken emotions live as anxiety, chronic tension, or depression. You feel it in your voice, which quivers when you try to speak your truth. You've been taught to doubt your inner world, to mute your instincts, to second-guess your reality, all because silence ruled your childhood. Healing this inheritance begins with breaking that silence, not in anger, but in truth. Start by naming what was never named. Say what wasn't said. Write letters you never send. Speak the pain you were told to ignore. Your nervous system needs to know that it is safe to feel now, that you are not a child anymore, that your truth matters, that your emotions are not burdens, they are messages from your soul. This work is terrifying at first. To break generational silence is to betray an entire lineage of survival. You may feel guilt for speaking the truth. You may worry that you are dishonoring your mother, but silence is not sacred. What is sacred is the courage to feel, to speak, to heal. You are not here to betray your bloodline, you are here to heal it, and when you begin to speak what was once unspeakable, a strange alchemy happens, the shame begins to dissolve, the inner child begins to feel held. Your adult self begins to stand up straighter, with more clarity and less confusion. Your relationships begin to shift because you are no longer unconsciously searching for a mother in every person you love. You stop needing people to decode your silence because now you speak. You stop punishing yourself for having needs because now you honor them. You stop fearing your truth because now you understand its sacredness. Understand this: emotional silence is a form of trauma, not always violent or loud, but insidious. It trains you to disown parts of yourself. It fragments your psyche. It keeps you disconnected from your own emotional world. And no matter how spiritual, successful, or outwardly stable you become, you will never feel whole until you reclaim your voice. This is why healing from the mother wound is not just about forgiving her or understanding her story. It is about reclaiming what her silence took from you, your right to feel, to speak, to exist fully. You may be the first in your family to do this, and yes, it will feel lonely at times, but it will also be holy. Because you are not just healing yourself, you are changing the emotional DNA of your entire lineage. You are breaking a cycle of silence that may have gone on for centuries, and one day someone will say of you, because of them I was allowed to feel. Because of them I knew love could be safe. Because of them I had a voice. Let that be your legacy. Speak now, not for vengeance but for liberation. Speak for the child inside you and the mother who couldn't. Speak for the daughters yet to be born. Speak because your silence was never your truth. It was your inheritance, and it ends with you. It's one thing to say you've forgiven your mother. It's another thing entirely to discover, in the middle of a relationship, that you're still playing out her wounds like a script you never chose to write. You tell yourself you're healed, you meditate, journal, go to therapy, but then your partner forgets to call or doesn't say, "I love you," the way you want to hear it, or withdraws for just a moment. And suddenly you're 6 years old again, sitting in a quiet room, waiting for a woman who never came emotionally. This is the brutal truth about the mother wound. It does not stay confined to childhood. It travels with you. It disguises itself as insecurity, anxious attachment, codependency, people pleasing, and emotional starvation. You find yourself in relationships where you give everything and receive crumbs. You cling to people who can't love you the way you deserve, or you push away good love because deep down it feels foreign, unsafe even. Your inner child is not looking for a lover, she's looking for a mother. The wound is primal. Before you ever had language, before you had cognition or reason, you had a nervous system. That nervous system was shaped by the presence or absence of your mother's attunement. If she was emotionally distant, cold, preoccupied, self-absorbed, or emotionally immature, then your very first map of love was drawn with broken lines. You learned that love means reaching and not being met. That love means proving, earning, shrinking, or performing. That love means surviving emptiness. And so, when you enter adult relationships, you unconsciously recreate the emotional conditions of your childhood, not because you want to suffer, but because your nervous system is wired for the familiar, not the healthy. You chase unavailable people because that's what love always felt like. You suppress your needs because that's how you survived rejection. You accept emotional neglect because deep down you still believe that being ignored is your natural state. It's not, but try telling that to the part of you that still hopes love can be redeemed through repetition. The part that thinks, maybe this time if I love enough, they'll finally choose me. What you don't realize is that you're not trying to win this person's love. You're trying to rewrite history. You're trying to get from them what you never got from her. And that task will break your heart every time, because no partner, no matter how kind, attentive, or available, can fill the mother-shaped void inside you. This is where the healing must begin. Not in searching harder for someone who will love you right, but in turning inward to grieve the loss of what you never had. That grief is sacred. It is not weakness. It is your liberation. Because when you finally stop demanding from others what your mother could not give, you take the first real step toward becoming emotionally sovereign. That grief will undo you. You will feel hollow, angry, heartbroken, betrayed. And you must let yourself feel it all. No bypassing, no minimizing, no numbing. You must sit with the truth. My mother could not love me the way I needed, not because I was unlovable, but because she was wounded too. You mourn not just the love you missed, but the person you might have become if you had received it. That mourning is how the soul rewrites its story, and then, slowly, you begin to parent yourself. You learn the language of your own emotional needs. You stop abandoning yourself when others withdraw. You speak up when you feel unseen. You stop chasing people who mirror your mother's absence. You choose relationships that feel safe, warm, grounded. Not because it's exciting, but because it's healing. You begin to understand that love is not scarcity, it's not performance, it's not volatility. Love is steady, love is seen, love is freedom. And when you stop relating to others from the place of your wound, you start relating from your wholeness. That's when intimacy becomes possible, not the trauma-bonded kind, but the sacred kind. Many of us are terrified of this shift because it means giving up the fantasy that we can rewrite our childhood through romance. But that's the most powerful moment of your healing, when you realize you are no longer a child begging to be chosen. You are an adult capable of choosing love that honors your soul. You also start seeing your mother with more clarity, not to judge her, but to understand her humanity. Maybe she too was unloved. Maybe she gave what she had. Maybe she was so lost in her own pain that she never found her way to you. This doesn't excuse the harm, but it helps you stop expecting redemption through reenactment. It frees you from the compulsion to keep bleeding for someone else's wound. In time, your relationships transform, not because your partner changed, but because you did. You stopped being the child, and you became your own nurturer. You stopped performing for love, and you started resting in it. You stopped looking backward, and you began walking forward with sacred boundaries, radiant self-trust, and a heart no longer defined by hunger. You realized that the person you were always waiting for was not your mother. Not a partner, it was you. You will still miss her sometimes, still ache for what could have been, still feel that flicker of hope that maybe she'll change. That's okay. Healing is not erasure, but now that hope no longer drives your life. You've built something steadier, something deeper, something your mother couldn't give, but your soul always knew was possible. That is your inheritance now, not silence, not absence, not longing, but self, love born through fire. Love that no longer begs, love that does not chase ghosts, love that comes home to itself. When you looked into your mother's eyes as a child, you weren't just looking for love, you were looking for yourself, for evidence that you existed, for a reflection of your worth. Long before you had the language to say, I am worthy, you needed someone to show it to you. In her gaze, in her tone, in her embrace. But what if the mirror was cracked? What if instead of warm attunement you found detachment? Instead of gentle presence you found criticism? Instead of reassurance you found unpredictability or coldness? Then your sense of self did not begin with I am enough. It began with what did I do wrong? Your earliest identity was shaped not by truth, but by compensation. This is the core of the mirror effect. The way your mother responded to your presence taught you who you thought you were, not who you actually are. If she reflected fear, you believed you were dangerous. If she reflected anger, you believed you were a burden. If she reflected silence, you believed you were invisible. You didn't know then that her reflection was more about her than you. But as a child, you had to believe it was about you, because your brain needed order, and the easiest way to make sense of inconsistency is to blame yourself. It's the illusion of control. If I'm the problem, maybe I can fix it. If I can be better, maybe she'll love me right. But this self-blame crystallizes into a core identity, and without intervention it grows into adulthood as low self-worth, vigilance, perfectionism, and a constant ache for external validation. You become the overachiever, the fixer, the peacekeeper, the one who puts others first to the point of vanishing. Even your compassion, your sensitivity, your empathy, your intuition often arises from this wound, because you learn to read others' emotional states like survival depended on it, and in a way it did. So what happens when that mirror is gone? When you're grown and your mother is no longer the dominant presence in your life? Do you suddenly become free? No, not immediately, because the mother wound is internalized. She's no longer outside of you, but she lives within you as the voice in your head, the one that tells you you're not enough, the one that minimizes your pain, the one that pushes you to prove your worth through doing rather than being. That voice sounds like your own, but it's not. It's the ghost of her reflection. This is where the deepest work lies, not in fixing yourself, but in recognizing that you were never broken. You were just reflecting a broken mirror. Healing begins when you stop trying to live up to the distorted image and start seeing yourself clearly. And how do you do that? You create new mirrors. You surround yourself with people who reflect your true essence, who see your worth without you performing for it, who remind you that your softness is not weakness, your needs are not burdens, your truth is not too much. You also become your own mirror. You begin the slow, often painful, but sacred process of reparenting yourself, of saying to your inner child what she never heard, I see you, I believe you, you don't have to earn love, it's already yours. This isn't about blaming your mother endlessly, it's about reclaiming the reflection you lost. It's about realizing that her inability to mirror your light had nothing to do with your light, and everything to do with her own unhealed darkness. And yes, this process will break your heart, because you'll grieve who you might have been if the mirror had been clear. You'll cry over the years you spent chasing love in all the wrong places. You'll rage at the silence that shaped your voice. But that grief is not weakness. That grief is clarity. It is the moment the fog begins to lift. Because once you see the mirror for what it was, you are no longer its prisoner. You stop bending yourself into shapes that fit other people's projections. You stop shrinking when someone disapproves. You stop equating rejection with your worth. You start living from a place of knowing rather than needing. You start saying no without guilt. You stop apologizing for your boundaries. You stop tolerating people who only love you when you're quiet, small, or self-sacrificing. And in this reclamation, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see yourself, not through the eyes of your wounded mother, but through the eyes of truth, grace, and soul. You see the tenderness that was once used against you as your greatest power. You see your hyper-awareness not as damage, but as deep empathy. You see your need for love not as desperation, but as a divine longing for connection. You realize you were never unworthy. You were just unseen. And now, finally, you begin to see yourself, clearly, kindly, fiercely. You pick up the broken pieces of the old mirror, not to reassemble it, but to build something new, a reflection that is not dependent on someone else's approval. A reflection rooted in your essence, not your adaptations. That is the alchemy of healing the mother wound. It is the art of taking what distorted you and turning it into vision. You no longer need someone else to show you who you are. Because you remember, you return, and in that return you become whole. Healing does not mean forgetting. It does not mean pretending the past never touched you. Healing means becoming the guardian of your inner world, the mother your wounded self always needed, and this chapter is about that rebirth. You'll never fully escape the shadows of your childhood, but you can learn to carry them differently. You can make the shadows part of your strength, not your sentence, and it begins when you stop waiting for her to become someone else. When you stop hoping she'll finally say, "I'm sorry," or "I was wrong," or "I see you now." Maybe she will, maybe she won't, but your healing can't depend on it. You do not need her permission to heal. You do not need her blessing to thrive. You are not bound to repeat her wounds like a sacred script. You are allowed to begin again, and to begin again you must learn the sacred art of remothering yourself, not in place of her, but in honor of the parts of you that were left unseen. You become the witness to your own pain, the nurturer of your own needs, the voice that speaks love when your inner child trembles with fear. You may not even realize how deeply you've internalized her voice, how quickly you criticize yourself, dismiss your feelings, or belittle your efforts. That voice has been rehearsed for years, and now it's time to interrupt the performance. You do this not by force, but by presence. When you wake up exhausted but keep pushing because rest is laziness, pause and ask, "Who told me that? Is it true?" When you find yourself spiraling in shame after saying something vulnerable, ask, "Whose fear am I carrying? Is this my voice or hers?" When you notice yourself shrinking in relationships, sacrificing your truth to keep peace, ask, "Would I want my child to do the same?" These are the sacred questions that break cycles, not by blaming, but by bringing light to what has lived too long in the dark, and then you act differently. You rest when you're tired, not because you've earned it, but because you're human. You speak kindly to yourself, not because you're perfect, but because you're worthy of love as you are. You stop tolerating relationships that mirror the emotional starvation of your childhood. You choose peace over performance, presence over perfection, and here's what most don't tell you. This process is terrifying because even pain has comfort when it's familiar. Even chaos feels safe when it's all you've known. Becoming the mother you never had will feel wrong at first, because it contradicts every survival pattern you learned as a child. But every time you choose love over fear, softness over shame, presence over performance, you are not just healing yourself, you are rewriting the legacy. You become the interruption, the pattern breaker, the first voice in the ancestral line that says no more. And this ripple goes beyond you. If you have children, they will feel the difference. If you don't, the people you love will still be changed by your presence. Because healed people love differently, they breathe differently, they see others with gentler eyes. You were never meant to carry her wounds forever, but you were meant to learn from them, to let them shape your compassion, not your self-worth. To let them build your resilience, not your bitterness. To let them forge your voice, not silence it. Becoming the mother you never had is not about perfection, it's about devotion, the kind of steady, quiet love that says to yourself every day, I am safe here. I am seen here, I belong here. That is the love your younger self craved. That is the mirror that was missing, and now you become it. It's a holy thing, this path, to look back at the ruins of your childhood and say, from this I will build a sanctuary. To take the coldness you inherited and turn it into warmth. To offer to yourself the love that should have been yours all along. Because once you mother yourself fully, nothing can take that from you. No rejection, no silence, no absence. You are home now, and healing in its deepest form is not a destination. It's a relationship, a lifelong relationship with your own soul. You are not healing to fix who you are. You are healing to remember who you've always been. Healing is not linear, it is not neat, it is not tidy, it is wild and sacred, raw and cyclical. It's the slow unfolding of truth buried deep in your bones, truth that can no longer be denied. Understanding your mother is not about blaming her, it's about liberating yourself. It's about breaking the spell of silence, of shame, of patterns so old they feel like fate. This journey isn't about making her a villain or a saint. It's about making you whole. You do not heal by rewriting the past. You heal by reclaiming your present, because the wounds she gave you, they didn't define you, but they did shape how you loved, how you spoke to yourself in the dark, how you chose partners who echoed her absence and friends who mirrored her neglect. Now you begin again, not by pretending none of it happened, but by choosing what you will carry forward. You are not here to finish your mother's unlived life. You are not here to repeat her suffering like a hymn. You are here to become something new, something freer, softer, stronger. You are the alchemist of your own pain. And every time you choose to stay, to feel, to understand, to soften, when it would be easier to run, to numb, to blame, you move closer to that sacred fire inside you, that light she couldn't extinguish, that voice she couldn't silence, that love that never stopped waiting for you, because deep within your grief lies your greatest power, and it says, even though I was never fully mothered, I have become my own sanctuary. You'll never forget her, no, but you will forgive her, not for her sake, but for your freedom. You will rise from the ache, not as the wounded child, but as the awakened self, and when that day comes, the world will not see your pain. It will see your peace, your gentleness, your fire, your strength, and you'll smile, not because it was easy, but because you came home to yourself.